On which level do you think, or on all levels, does the film operate?
You have raised so many excellent points. What I hope the film does is exactly this: generate questions for people to talk about. It is not intended, and if we've failed, then you tell me, but the intention is a little bit of a Trojan horse. You feed an audience an event that gets your blood pumping. Many people feel at a certain point that come on, pull the trigger, launch the hellfire. Many people, maybe not this audience, but many people. And then you sort of do a little twist on them, and then you twist it a little further. And there are questions. You can pause this film, Guy Hibbert's wonderful script, in many places, and ask the kind of, and spin off, and say, stop. You've just raised one point, whether it be drone pilot post-traumatic stress, we talk about that, whether it be the questions you raise about whether your nationality should give you a greater right to life than not. As a person who grew up in South Africa, I can tell you it galls non-Americans and non-Brits to hear you guys even say that. Is the right to life dependent on your nationality? When did that happen? That's not human rights law, but we don't go there in the film. But it pops up all of a sudden. So it's okay to target a guy who's not an American citizen. Whoa, it's an American citizen, we have a conversation. It's the same country pulling the trigger. How do you think it feels to be a citizen of South Africa or anywhere else? So I would argue it's bad propaganda. It's horrible propaganda. To even suggest that we should take greater time to consider whether we launch a missile at a human life. It's okay to launch that missile at a non-citizen, but if it's a citizen, oh my God, we need a big discussion. Well, that's the truth. That's what's happening. But imagine not being a citizen, and imagine the people who feel that when that drone strike is authorized, less thought is put into it.
There are military considerations, there are political considerations, and then there are
human rights considerations, and emotional, just basic human emotional considerations. Some people would argue, and it would be totally fair, good Lord, you chose a little girl. I thought, well, maybe this is too far. It was in Guy's script, and at one point I said, maybe we should just have an elderly man or an elderly woman, because the same thing should apply.
Right.
But then there's the great line that Alan Rickman says. He says, I hope you are not being unduly influenced, I forget exactly, by the fact that she's a sweet little girl.
Yeah.
Dozens of other little girls' lives are at stake if these men leave. And he's right. A lot of times in my films, there are children. Because we as adults, we throw out our movies, we put our R ratings. Children are our innocence. And in a way, when you take the child's life, it is the ultimate loss of innocence. And the loss of innocence is our innocence. That, when we do this, we are not, if it was an older person and you somehow thought that was okay, then you haven't really stuck it to your audience. This is a human life. And maybe I'm showing you one that's too sweet, but all human life should be sweet. Well, if we're considered, now that doesn't mean, I hasten to say, folks, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to say that they shouldn't have pulled the trigger. I don't know. And if I do, I'm not going to say, because the whole point of the film is for us collectively to wrestle with this question and not for the director to tell you what to think. That's absolutely not the case.
Here, everyone through the eye in the sky is seeing the consequence. You're seeing the little girl.
Which is why these pilots are suffering twice the traumatic stress disorder. I'm sure there's also the issue of going home and coming straight back to work and not having time to decompress. But they have twice the PTSD, as I'm sure you know, and then fighter pilots in a combat zone. And we had a drone pilot who advised us, was there. We did not seek authorization, I hasten to say, from the Pentagon or the film office, but we independendly found experts in different fields, whether it be in the legal field or the drone pilot. But our drone pilot was a fighter pilot for 10 years, F-16 pilot, flew in Iraq, been a drone pilot for 6 years. And yes, those are the questions.
Well, and I assume he said that the drone is much harder for him.
He said so because he said when I flew in Iraq, although he said psychologically, even though I wasn't in great danger because I was in and out, my heart was racing because I could be shot down, so somehow that felt right. And secondly, I dropped my payload and I left. He says as a drone pilot, now he's now in the reserve, so he's still flying, but I can see this has been something for him. And he said, Gavin, it's having to stay for a 12-hour shift and stay and watch and go back and not have any risk to myself. That causes a real strange disconnect.
And the visual image of what you're actually doing, as opposed to from a distance.
From a distance going drop.
Right.
Yeah. So if we want to get some sense of what it's like to pull the trigger, every drone pilot has the moment where they pull the trigger for the first time. And when you speak to any drone pilot or any fighter pilot, any soldier, the first time they take human life is a traumatic moment, and they either find a way to compartmentalize and move on, or they don't. There's a lot of conversation about, are you pro-drone or you anti-drone? You might as well ask that question of virtually every single weapon ever invented. When the longbow was invented, people were anti the longbow. And how dare you take pot shots from far away, you coward. There were arguments written about this. When the interballistic missile is invented, when the nuclear bomb is invented, technology, we are always finding new ways to kill each other. So for me, the question is, yes, we need to understand what the technology is, and it may be awful technology, and it may be that it needs to be banned the way we banned weapons that use poisonous gas. Maybe that is where this needs to go. But on the other hand, that drone does have it's not like a bomb that drops cluster bombs. So in a sense, when people say it is more accurate, they're not wrong. It is more accurate than a cluster bomb. You're looking, but it's still a hellfire. It's not a sniper's bullet. So those who are arguing this is the most humane weapon ever, come on. People talk about the minimal collateral damage and the brilliance of this weapon. He says, how about the guillotine in France? A great, accurate weapon. No collateral damage, whoop, heads off, nice and clean, done. It's not a question of discussing the guillotine. The question is, did you put the right head on the block? And the second question is, how's this crowd going to react that's watching this execution? Are they for us, or are they going to go against us, to use a strange twist on George Bush? And maybe even if we got the right guy, maybe executing him in front of this crowd is going to make more. That's the question. So we should see the drone, and Shaman Yu argues this better than I can. It is a tactical weapon. It does not replace a conversation about overall strategy. The strategy that we are engaged in, I think we're all on the same side of this, I'm sure in this room, I hope, we are trying to reduce the spread of extremist ideology in whatever form. That's the goal. So any strategy or strike that increases the spread of extremist ideology is a failure, in my view. That's really, and the weapon be damned. Yeah. Whatever the weapon is, what's the strategy, and does it getting the satisfaction of taking out the bad guy without thinking through the consequences of taking out the bad guy is not good military strategy. And that's why I don't think it's a film that shouldn't be discussed by both sides. Growing up in South Africa, at a time where things almost went into a bloody revolution with divisiveness and some of the speech we're hearing now, and a great leader pulled us back. And I suppose one is drawn to themes that are not just about good versus evil, but the gray zone, the potential for evil within me, the need for me to be aware and constantly question my own approach is, I think, what I'm drawn to given my background. And that's why I think the arguments in the film that do agonize, perhaps more than people might, they're really a call to, can we think like this? Let's think like this on both sides and not take these extreme positions. Drones are bad, drones are good. It's too simplistic, in my view. You know, there was a time when a signature strike is a strike where you actually don't know the identity of the person. But the signature that they're giving off suggests that they are a bad guy. So a man with an AK-47 is probably a militant. Boom! Oops, every Afghan man carries an AK-47. Sorry about that. We stopped some of those signature strikes. A lot of strikes happened because there was not a cultural understanding that people in those areas don't go walking around in the mountains without their gun, just like some people in this country. I'm not saying you don't take someone out with a sniper bullet, but you don't celebrate it. You've taken a life. It may be necessary, but you don't stand up and dance. If it's wrong, if certain individuals running for the politics can object to people dancing in the streets as he pretends so many did, but certainly some did, over 9/11, then we don't need to dance in the street when we kill. We don't. Because it's undignified, and if you just want to be political about it, it's not good propaganda if you're trying to win the other side over.
How consciously do you think governments and the military interpose many people, he or she's many people, in the decisions to make the drone strike in order to sanitize the killing? This is sort of a Nazi bureaucracy question, right? That the way I interpreted the film earlier, and I said, well, the film shows you people agonizing over this, and in that way, it's certainly not a pro-drone film, because there's people in great moral conflict with each other, arguing up various different levels of stages of command. So therefore, it's a well-considered decision, even if you don't like the decision. This person's saying, are you kidding? It may be that the more people you throw into the decision-making, it limits their own sense of personal responsibility.
That's a very
The hell with it. I was
point.
one of 15 people who made the decision. I was just a small cog in a big decision. I love that question, whoever that you are.
Yeah, whoever you are, very, very excellent question, and I don't have a good answer. I think that's we should have a whole conversation about that. Maybe it's part of the frustration of General Benson. On the other hand, do you only want General Benson making that decision? He wants that decision.
Right.
So I don't know. I will tell you one little story. I was sitting in a movie screening where some people were invited to a film of mine, not this one actually.
Ender's Game.
Yes, and a phone went off. And the individual who shall be nameless was a very senior individual in the military who'd come with some friends to watch the film and was a very nice man. And he answered the phone, and I heard him say, yes. Yes, is the intelligence good? Mm-hmm. You're sure? All right then, yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Bye-bye. And I want to, and another gentleman who was with him, because I didn't know him well, he'd been brought by another guest, said to him afterwards, does this happen often? So I was hanging back listening. And I guess it does. And you can't say it's wrong. If you got to go up this chain, it's what your question is asking. He hasn't got, at his level, I guess, time to go through all of these detailed notes. He's got to trust who. But in a way, the person below has passed the buck to him. Right. He's taking that responsibility, but did he agonize through the entire pack? I think this is not necessarily even something we can, it's so mind-boggling that the only thing I hope the film does, and I am thankful, this is going to sound strange, I am thankful to both the Reprieve organization, who've been amazing in terms of their response to the film, and to the military. I was with a general the other day, and he wants to screen this film in all the colleges for young officers. Wow. To generate conversation. I think if there's something coming out of this, maybe we're all tired of positional bargaining. Maybe not all of us, but maybe we do want to talk to each other, because it doesn't have to help to have one side of the argument constantly pitching and the other side not listening. And we do want some real discussion. So if the film makes a small contribution to that with all its flaws and its inability to give you all the answers, maybe it just demystifies what drones are for us. And then smarter people than I am, and you guys who are going to write the detailed papers about this, maybe this is just a prompt to a conversation, as opposed to discussing something in a completely abstract way. I hope that's what it does.